good day there, everybody. This is Joe. Today I have a little project I want to make. This is a little tripod project. You probably know that in the past I've built a number of homemade tabletop tripods, and my whole tripod system has kind of evolved over the years because of my needs for shooting mainly video. And currently what I'm using is a cobbled together system that is used for when I'm sitting at my desk here, and it places my camera lens right at eye level from my chair to my table, and it's really a great thing. It works really good. I'll show you here in a second what it is, but I'm also using several new pieces of video gear for my production. One of those is this video light. This is a Viltrix, and I'm currently using it on a UltraPod 2 on my table. When I use it on the tabletop, the light is down here. The light comes from up here, and I'd rather have it a little bit more like this. So it's a little nicer kind of lighting coming from above. I would need a taller tripod, and I don't want to use a traditional tripod with the legs coming out because it's going to clutter my desk up. And so I need a higher version of what I'm using here, which you don't know what that is yet. The other thing is I also have this Lilliput video monitor that also mounts to a tripod, and I'd like to have that at the same level as the camera, right next to it, so I can just look back and forth. So I need to make a second tripod the same height as this one that the camera's on, and then make a third tripod a little higher for my video light. Well, let's take a look at what my tripod is. Okay, so what I'm using here is the feet of this tripod. It's the foot of the monopod that I have, and these little individual feet, or I guess you call them toes, right? They fold up, but basically this has a ball head that's kind of tight, and you can kind of articulate it if you want. And then I found a dowel that fits almost perfectly, like a 7/8 inch dowel that fits in this little clamp. And then I have a piece of wood glued up here and a 1/4-20. This is actually a furniture foot you can get at the hardware store, and I use a Joby GorillaPod ball head, and so this places my camera right here at eye level, ideal for videoing from my desk, from my chair in a seated position. So I really need another tripod, but I like this, but I don't have another foot assembly like this, and I don't want to buy another one. And my idea is I'm going to have a little T-shaped foot made from square wooden sticks that I have, and the lengths of the feet are going to be such that the tips of these three make an equilateral triangle, and I've calculated the simple math to figure out where the centroid of that triangle is and how long each piece needs to be to make that equilateral. And then from this middle point, I'll have a hole drilled in and a screw coming up from the bottom, and it supports a wooden dowel. And then the top of the system is going to have a similar wooden plate. The hole of the dowel goes through the plate. It's glued in there and pinned, and then there's the secondary hole next to it for the 1/4-20 nut, the bolt that holds the camera in place. So it's a real simple foot system, a little tabletop tripod that's preset to a specific height. And then I see myself using it like this. My view from in front of the camera. Here's my camera with the flip out screen. Here's my secondary tripod that's the same height that has the video monitor next to it. And then over here is the taller tripod with the video light. And that's kind of what I see using these three tripods for. Alternatively, I could design a kludge, like a big long piece of wood that has the three things mounted on it, the light and the camera and the monitor, and then have a really heavy tripod that would support it all, which you'd need a heavy tripod. But I like the flexibility of having three separate small little tabletop supports, because each of them individually is fairly small, and I can move them around individually on the desk. As you might see earlier, my desk is pretty crowded with this and that, so I have to be able to make room. Now, this tripod system is not the traditional pyramid-shaped legs coming out. This is more of a platform on the bottom that's three-legged. And so I think it'll work okay for this application. The one I'm using now with the mechanical legs, the feet, the tips of those feet are 9 inches across from tip to tip. So I'm basing my other tripod as a 9-inch spread. The taller one, though, for the light is going to be a little bit bigger. I'll probably make it like 10 or 11-inch footprint just to give it a little more stability. Well, like a lot of things I do, I try to use scrap material that's in my workshop and out my storage shed to try to make this so I can avoid going to the hardware store and spending more money. So let's go out to the garage, and I've been working on assembling some stuff together. And let's swap cameras. We're going to use the little Canon camera here for this. Okay, so for the smaller of the two tripods, the first tripod, that's going to be the same height as the existing tabletop tripod. I'm going to be using this 5/8 inch square stock that I had. This is poplar, and it's going to form the feet here. And then the dowel, so I'm having to kind of makeshift together stuff. This is not nearly the same diameter as what my other tripod is, but this is 1/2 inch oak, a 1/2 inch oak dowel. And it's nice and heavy wood, of course, being oak, but the nice thing is that the size of the 5/8, it looks like it'll mount nicely there. Then I have a scrap of wood. This actually came out of my kitchen remodel. This was a piece of trim that was in my original kitchen when it was built in the early 1960s. And I don't know what it is. It could be, I don't know, probably could be pine, but it may be spruce or poplar or something like that. Anyways, so I'm going to cut this down, cut it off where these holes are. So basically it'll end up being like about this big. And I'll have one hole cut in it from the Forstner bit to mount the dowel, and then the next to it will be a hole for the 1/4-20 mounting bolt for the tripod head. So that will make the first tripod. And the intention, measuring the other tripod, the intention is to put the tripod head at about 14 inches above the table. The other tripod needs to be a little taller, and so I have, what is this, 3/4 inch spruce, or actually poplar, from the hardware store, and so a little heavier. And I'm going to make the spread on this T-shaped foot, instead of being 9 inches, I'll probably make it like 11 inches, something like that. And then I have a bigger size, so this is a 7/8 inch dowel that will mount onto that like that. And I have a scrap of 1/2 inch oak that I need to cut into a rectangle. And that dowel will mount up into this with a hole cut by a Forstner bit. So that'll be my taller tripod for the light. So it looks like I have enough scrap wood here. As far as tools, I have my 1/2 inch Forstner bit for my smaller of the two dowels. And then I have my 7/8 Forstner bit for the larger of the two. So it's raining outside. It's been raining for the last day or so. And so I'm going to go ahead and open the garage door, and hopefully we won't get too much rain in. I don't want to cut this wood with all this sawdust floating around in my workshop here. What happens here is this T that I'm making, in order to make the tips of it form an equilateral triangle, this piece here has to be shorter by the thickness of the sticks, which I'm calling the T or thickness number. Anyways, so it calculates out with the smaller of the two tripods. I'm using 5/8 inch thick sticks. It turns out that the secondary piece, so the primary piece is 9 inches long, and the secondary piece is going to be about 7 11/64 if you want to get really exact with it. And then this distance I'm calling Y, which is the centroid of the triangle, you again have to account for the thickness of the wood. And so that turns out to be about 2 inches, basically. 2 inches from here is where the hole's going to be for the mounting of the dowel. The larger of the two triangles, I'm going to be using a 10-inch base. And so it turns out to be the secondary piece on the larger one is 7 59/64, which is pretty close to 8 inches. And then the distance to the hole is going to be 2 9/64. So I'll try to get fairly exact with it. It doesn't have to be precisely exact, but it's nice to know what it should be. So that's what happens, is you calculate it really exactly, and then you actually construct it to a lower degree of accuracy, but try to be as accurate as I can be. Okay, I got to move my motor scooter around and get my little work table set up near the garage door so I can open the garage and get the dust out while I'm cutting wood, and hopefully the rain won't come in. Okay, so here is the two pieces. Here are the two pieces, and they will form pretty close to equilateral triangle. And then I need to measure the centroid point where I'm going to drill the hole for the support. Okay, now I need to cut the little block of wood for the head of the smaller tripod, and then I'll start cutting the bigger pieces for the larger tripod. Okay, so for the first smaller tripod, I want the height of the tripod base to the table to be 14 inches. That'll match my existing tripod that my camera is on. And so in order to do that, the wooden dowel is going to go up through the base of the tripod like that, but it's going to be sitting on the sticks like that. So I need to subtract the thickness of the base sticks. Okay, now for the larger tripod, to cut the big square 3/4 inch stick, the dowel, and the oak piece for the head. So for the taller tripod, I want the base to be 17 inches to the desk. So that means with 3/4 inch sticks, I need this to be 16 1/4 inches in length. The stick needs to be 8 and 21/30 seconds. So and for this piece of wood that's going to be the top plate of the bigger tripod, I'm simply going to just cut it off right here. Cut this wedge off, whatever size it is. I just want it to be as big as I can make it from this piece of wood. Okay, so I've measured where I want to drill my holes in the top plate of the small tripod. Just the starter holes for the drill bits. And then the T base, I have my mark for the centroid, where the vertical post will be drilled. There'll be a screw mounted in there. And then I have my lines here for where I want this to be. And a 16th inch drill bit is for a pilot hole for all this. Okay, so the 3/8 hole goes here, 1/4 inch hole goes here. Okay, for the oak. Well, I went through all my spare nuts and screws and hardware, and yes, I did end up having to go to the hardware store. I'm going to use these eye bolts as little knobs for the shaft that tightens up the camera's mount. And then I have a bunch of little specialty screws and washers and nuts. Okay, so for my 1/4 bolt that mounts the things to the tripod, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch Forstner bit to drill into here and here. When I attach the two sticks together to form the T-shaped base, I could put say a wood screw through here, but it's awful thin, and so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole out and use a wooden dowel, a pin. So I'm going to pin those together and glue them that way. So I already have my pilot hole drilled. I have it marked where I will be putting the wood at, so I just need to drill a hole out in here. Okay, so for mounting the dowel to the base, I'm going to use this machine screw, and it's sort of a flat, almost pan head. I'm going to mount it a little bit countersunk on the bottom so that there's enough thread sticking up to go into the dowel here, and I have to drill a hole here and size this hole for the screw. Okay, so I have my screw screwed in part way. The tip is pointing out here, and I have a countersunk or a recessed hole for the head to go down into. So now we got to drill out a hole in the end of the oak shaft. I'm going to apply some wood glue to that end of the hole, and a little bit in there, and I'm going to put this down in here. Clamp it and let the wood glue dry a little bit. Okay, these dowels and the Forstner bits are never exactly the same, so I put some masking tape in here, and I'm going to glue this in place so it's flush with the top here. And when the glue is set, then I'm going to drill a hole down through the side and pin it with another wooden dowel. Okay, so for the larger tripod, I have the two cross pieces glued and screwed together. Glue is drying, and then this mounting point for the vertical rod is countersunk already. And I'll be using this kind of a screw to mount it in there. Okay, so for the large tripod, I have the hole drilled in already to take the screw coming up from the bottom of the base. And on the top of the shaft, I have the shaft ready to be glued into the top part. Well, okay, so here is the small tripod, the T here, the oak dowel, and the screw that holds it in place. The glue is drying there, and the head of it, pardon the microphone, and the head up here. So this guy is pretty much ready to go, except for putting the little feet on the bottom, the rubber feet, which I have 3 of these little faucet washers that will attach on to the bottom, and I have some bigger washers for the larger tripod. It's probably a good idea to explain why I'm needing to make yet another set of tripods when I've made these wooden ones in the past that I've done videos about. Let me show you what the limitation is of this kind of a tripod. It all kind of started as inspiration from the UltraPod 2 design, which folds down to a nice little package like this, and the legs unfold, and they make 90-degree angles relative to the main leg, and it makes an equilateral triangle stance if the legs are folded out all the way. But it's a very short tripod. It's only maybe 6 inches up off the table. And so I just wanted to build a bigger version of the same thing, and it uses the same idea in terms of the angles on the leg. And I had to build this makeshift ball head assembly. It is limited as far how far high up off the table it places the camera. And the big limitation is it has a really wide stance. And so for having 3 tabletop tripods next to each other, I needed something with a smaller stance. And so here are the 2 little tripods in their finished state. You notice this one, of course, is shorter than that one. They both have the rubber washers as feet on the bottom. And of course, what I'm doing with the hardware, I have a eye bolt with a 1/4 locking, a nylon locking nut, and a fender washer, and that goes on the bottom of the tripod head, and then on the top is a large neoprene washer that gives some cushioning for whatever you're attaching to the head of it. Well, we'll start with a small tripod. 146 grams, including all the hardware on the head. And the big one is 260 grams, including all the hardware on the head. Well, here is the finished result set up on my desk. So we have the video light to the left. Its intensity is turned down quite a bit. And we have the camera, my GH3 camera, and of course I have the monitor for monitoring the camera, which I will scoot close to the camera like that, so I can monitor my recording. I can be looking at the camera lens. I can glance over at the monitor to see if I framed up right, and then this light is a little bit higher than the cameras, and looking down on me, it should give me some good light. Now you'll notice the base of the tripod, the 3 tripods now, they fit nicely on my desk, and they kind of fit around all the different clutter and stuff that's on my desk. Here's the big tripod with the light, here's the one that's using the monopod foot for the camera, and of course the smaller wooden one for the monitor. And so yeah, it works pretty nicely. It doesn't take up a huge amount of room on the desk, and I can still put stuff in front of it. You know, I can put notebooks and everything else, and it doesn't take up too much space. I can move them around also. I don't have to keep them exactly in the same location. I can move this here. I can move the camera a little bit. If I want to move the light in and out various ways, works good. So I'm using this ball head for the monitor that came with the monitor, and I'm using Joby Gorilla Head ball heads for the camera and the light, because the camera especially, of course, you have to have a good adjustable head, and the light, you need to adjust the position of that also for the best illumination. So there it is. Let's switch it and see what it looks like on the GH3. I should mention that the things I'm trying to do with these 3 tripods together, having a light and a monitor and then a place to put your camera, this is kind of what people use cages for. A cage is a frame that surrounds the camera. The camera kind of mounts into it, and it has all these mounting points that you can attach accessories to. Yeah, I could buy a cage for this camera. I could actually make one. Of course, I like making little things like this, but I really think that these 3 separate tabletop tripods are going to work better for me than a full cage. Because the full cage is everything in one unit, and then you need a really heavy tripod to support it. Whereas I'm using 3 very lightweight tripods, and their combined weight is much less than one beefy tripod big enough to support a full cage for all this gear. So that's kind of the solution right now, at least for tabletop use. Now, when I go over to my table over here and do the full studio setup, I do use a floor standing tripod. But I have video lights, as you can probably see right there, already set up, and the monitor sits on the table, so I don't really need the cage setup when I'm over there. But this kind of a setup at a table, any table in my house, the workbench in the garage, wherever, this was going to work really good, it looks like. Okay, so I have my camera set to 4,000 Kelvin, and this Veltrox light, I have it also set to 4,000 Kelvin. So we should be pretty close to the right color temperature. And yeah, it's nice having it like this, and I can adjust the camera's tripod position. And right off to your left, I can look over at the big monitor and see if I'm in focus and framed up correctly. Yeah, this is really nice. I have this little studio, tabletop studio, when I don't want to use my big table back behind me there. I really like this. And also any other kind of a tabletop situation, like the table in my dining room, for instance, anywhere you have a little seating area that you sit in front of, you can make into a studio like this. Lights, monitor, camera. Well, this is Joe Van Cleve. I hope this was interesting to you guys. Gave you some inspiration that you can make your own homemade tripods using a little bit of innovative design standard hardware store materials like these square little wooden sticks and standard hardware bits that you get from the hardware stores. Repurposing things like the eye bolts as a way of mounting your cameras on the tripod heads, and using those little rubber faucet washers as feet for your tripods. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things we can do to repurpose these commercially made items. Well, until next time, you guys have yourselves a great day.